your final accounts. It is from your final accounts that you now compute what we call tax computations. The fallout of that tax computations will determine whether you are going to pay tax or not. And then when you are done with your tax computations, the law expects you file with the relevant tax authority both your audited financial reports and then the requisite tax computations and the tax payments made. That is the self-assessment system. But the self-assessment system doesn't stop there. You know, the self-assessment system supposes that you assess yourself. And when you assess yourself, even me talking to you, you can remove the issue of subjectivity. It's natural. So, I'm a tax auditor, and I will always tell my clients or taxpayers when they come, because some of them will like, I pay tax. I've been paying my taxes. Why are you calling me again? Why are you subjecting me to this again? I told them, okay, whatever you paid was based on your own assessment. By way of natural justice, you agree with me that if government don't review what you have done, it's not balanced. So whatever we do by way of tax audit is just a review of your self-assessment that you've submitted with the relevant tax authority. And then current Nigerian tax system is technology-driven and database too. Importantly, I submit that taxation is statutory. That is, it's very mandatory. It's backed by the very weight of the law, both the Constitution and other relevant tax laws, as it is indispensable to modern government and every organized society for mobilization of funds for national development and provision of essential and social services such as education and health. So the reform, before the team set out, they had objectives. One of the objectives is harmonization of number one, that is the primary objective of the reform is to harmonize different tax laws scattered here and there, efficiency and modernization of the tax administration system, simplifying the tax rules, efficient government spending, how that will be. Okay, let me stop there. Transparency and integrity of revenue administration, updates to tax laws to reflect present realities, because most of the laws are archaic and doesn't reflect present economic and financial realities. International standards to upgrade our tax system to align with what is best practice globally. And then to broaden the tax base as well. These are some of the objectives of the tax reform. And as a systemic activity or a project, there were some underlying principles, some of which is clarity and simplicity. So they set out to make the tax law clear and simple, to unify multiple legislations into as little as possible. And they set out to make the economy competitive. Efficient tax administrative practices. That's what IMF, the World Bank, and the OECD call TADATs. It's called Tax Administration Diagnostics Tool. It's more or less an international standard that is used in measuring the efficiency and the effectiveness of a national tax system. So one of the principles of the team, of the committee, is to make our tax system TADAT compliant, and also to make ease of doing business much easier, and promote economic growth as well. And last but not the least is automation and making the system data-driven, and as well achieve economic objectives. The primary of it is that we should tax fruits and not seed, tax prosperity and not poverty. That is the tax reform, and the entirety of Nigerian tax system is meant to tax fruits, that is profits or gain out of your business venture, and not the prosperity, and not the seed. The seed here is the capital you set out the business with, and then not to tax poverty. That is why the system is geared in a way that it's progressive. The more income you have, the more you're expected to contribute into the commonwealth of the nation. And then, as I said earlier, one of the major one of the major objectives of the tax reform is to, as much as possible, to reunify the tax law. But before now, we have, as you can see in the diagram, okay, the diagram before me, we have like 12 major tax laws. But this 12 major tax laws has been compressed into 2 tax laws. One, you have the NTA, that's Nigerian Tax Act, which is the main act embodying the tax laws. And then we have the NTAA. The NTA takes care of the administration. Remember I said earlier that taxation is tripod. You have the policy, you have the tax laws, and then you have the administration. So the NTA took care of the law aspect. The NTAA took care of the administration aspects, which NRS and the likes handle. So currently, in place of multiple tax laws, we have the NTA taking care of the actual tax laws. We have the NTAA taking care of the administrative, the procedures, the processes for complying with the tax laws. And then the institutional setup has been transformed into, before now we have Federal Land Revenue Service, handling federally collected taxes, transformed into Nigerian Revenue Service. The essence is actually to reflect the name, Nigeria. And then we have the PITA before now was Personal Income Tax Act, transformed into Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act. So as I said earlier, the 4 pillars of the 2025 tax reform is to have the Nigerian Tax Act, which takes care of the actual laws, tax laws itself. Number 2, we have the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, which handles the procedures or the processes of complying with the tax law. And then number 3, we have the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act, which formally establishes FIRS as an autonomous, independent corporate entity. And last, we have the Joint Revenue Board, which takes care of, the Joint Revenue Act creates a permanent coordination mechanism between federal and
He expands the limits of whose prayer is heard.
Beaming from the nation's capital, we bring to you the good news through various programming, news updates, worship, and teachings.
The paralysis of sin makes us to be separated from God.
Contact us for your live streaming solutions and event coverage, such as synods, conferences, seminars, revivals, and lots more. Engage us in showcasing your brands and services to the world through adverts and sponsorship. We also offer latest broadcast.
Okay, now can you hear me from the back? Okay. Okay, now the actual implications for the church. So the 2025 Tax Act is not merely a technical adjustment of rates. It's a fundamental reimagining of the social contract between the Nigerian state and its citizen. My Lord Bishop and Reverend and Reverend clergy, I crave your kind indulgence to state that for decades, religious institutions operated within a gray area of the law, enjoying broad exemptions under the guise of public character, while occasionally venturing into commercial activities that blur the lines between sanctuary and shop. That's between church and business. Nigeria's 2025 Tax Reform Act maintains tax-exempt status for religious institutions. So the new tax law is necessary, I emphasize. The church is still exempted, but with some conditions. As far as your basic business, church basic business, which is worship unto God. And part of our worship includes our tithes, our offerings, our welfare donations, our appreciation of our pastors. All of these are exempted from tax. But you will agree with me that most churches, for reasons best known to all of us, venture into commercial and economic activities. These commercial and economic activities are taxable. In fact, it has been done over the years. But then the tax law emphasized it much more. I remember going to a Catholic diocese of NNEWI, the headquarters, to audit them, their bookshop. The lady there was like, but this is church. Even the tax consultant, who happens to be my professional colleague, was like, why are you disturbing the church? I said, madam, the earlier you told the church that beyond your tithe and offering and church-related donations, that any other thing you do is business and should be handled like the same way normal private and corporate business is handled out there. In fact, whatever the businessman in Onitsha over there is expected to comply with, the business or commercial arm of the church is expected to do same. You're expected to formalize that business venture by registering it with CAC. From CAC, you proceed to FIRS. After that, as the business commences, you're expected to keep records, accounting records. And then another very important thing I need to emphasize is, as much as possible, we should separate church business money and church spiritual money in quotes. It's very good we do that, because I am an auditor. When you don't separate it from time, it becomes difficult for you to convince us at the point of audit. But if you have clear records, this is church offering, this is income from bookshop, from printing press, from school, and then the likes of it. When we come, once we see the record straight, it makes sense. It becomes more believable to us. But when you lump the income together, and then when we raise the necessary additional assessment, in your defense, maybe with your tax consultant, you like tell us, no, that this one is supposed to be tithe and offering. For us, at that point, it's late, because we believe your response is actually biased, probably because of the huge assessment we gave to you. But if you had done it before time, even if you are lying, the truth is that it has the power and capacity to make us believe your records. So as much as possible, separate church money from business money. So, key aspects of the new tax law that is relevant to the relevant provisions of the new tax law for the church. Institutional exemption. As a religious body, before I proceed, it's important I emphasize that in the eyes of the law, the church is seen as a charitable organization. The church is seen as an NGO. So the same treatment they met out to NGOs, charitable organizations, foundations, is the same thing they met out to the church. Just like the state taxes whatever business or economic venture the church ventures into, so also when foundations like the Rotary Club and the rest of them ventures into any profit-making venture, they are expected to pay tax. So beyond the offerings, the tithes, we are very familiar with. Churches are meant to deduct and remit to government taxes of their individual employees. As a bishop, if the church pays you, before you are paid, the church is supposed to deduct your payee and remit to the relevant authority. The relevant authority here is wherever you reside. For personal income tax, wherever you are living is where you are meant to pay tax. Meanwhile, NRS or Federal Inland Revenue Service, they don't handle personal income tax, apart from that of Abuja residents before. But currently, wherever you are resident, if you are resident in Remo or wherever, you are meant to pay tax to Ogun State government and that. And beyond that, your clerk, your office support staff, before paying them, especially the full ones, because I understand we have some of them that are not full or permanent staff, but the very permanent ones, before you pay them on monthly basis, you are meant to deduct the tax element of their pay and then remit to government. You are meant to remit on the 10th day of the following month. That is, if the salary is paid in January or in February as we are, you have between now and 10th of March to remit payee deductions of your staff, both clergy and laity. Then commercial venture. If a church and every other religious organization or charitable organization like foundations engage in business like hotels and rest of them, profits from these activities are taxable and must be reported in line with tax compliance requirements we'll highlight later. VAT obligation. This is another very important aspect. You are actually meant, yes, the church as an institution is exempted from paying VAT, but when the outlay is meant for humanitarian purposes, humanitarian purposes here could be your outreach, your missions, your evangelism outreach and all that. But every other thing, when you make payment, you are expected to deduct VAT and withholding tax from that payment before making such payment. Just like when you go out there in the markets, they don't say, okay, you are a bishop or you are coming from the Anglican communion, you won't pay VAT. You pay VAT. But the difference is when whatever you bought or you purchased is maybe basic food item, pharmacy, medical equipment and the rest of them, there's zero rate for that. What that means is when you incur, for zero rated goods and services, when you incur the expense, currently in the tax law, there's a mechanism built in to refund you for VAT you paid when you purchased goods and services for humanitarian purposes. Remember, in the case of church, I said humanitarian purposes could mean your outreach is out there. It could mean your evangelism. It could mean any other thing that's meant to touch life. Any other thing that you don't factor in profit making or gain out of it is charitable. So when you make such, when you spend on that, you are meant to submit to NRS currently. In fact, we have a 30-day window to refund taxpayer for any VAT refund application. Failure, the taxpayer is empowered to keep that as a credit, as a tax offset for future tax liabilities or obligation. Another important thing that the church should note, especially at the diocese and the national level, is mandatory TCC before award of contracts. Assuming you hired me, which you didn't, as a consultant and I'm meant to be paid, you are supposed to demand for my tax clearance certificate before hiring me as a consultant. Before you award any contract, even to local church members, the law says you must cite the persons or the contractors or the consultants' tax clearance certificate and validate it that it is valid before awarding that contract to the person. This is one area the church fails big time. So henceforth, the law says before you award contracts, you know, there is a difference between over-the-counter purchase and services that is awarded. So for all those formal award of contracts, supplies, training, and consultancy, you are meant to demand for the tax clearance of the person offering that service before you award the contract. And then strict documentation as well. One of the things that the law requires of the church currently is just like the organized private sector out there, you are meant to keep accurate records of your transactions. And you know, every records by accounting process, every record, that's what we call basic vouchers. You are supposed to keep the receipts, the invoices. Because you just writing, keeping records is enough. An average taxman will have to cite your invoice to be sure it's real, that it's not cooked. So in addition to you keeping records, you are meant to keep the documents, the underlying vouchers, the receipt, the invoices, to vouch for your records. So overall, the 2025 reforms mark a shift towards greater accountability from the church, reducing the informal exemptions previously enjoyed by large-scale religious investments. These organizations must now operate with similar administrative competence of corporations to ensure compliance. While the religious entity is exempt, its commercial or investment arms are not. An individual income above the exempted threshold, the current threshold is 800,000. Now, for any of your staff, that the annual income you pay the person is less than 800,000, the person is not meant to pay tax. But you know the law, you are still supposed to file new returns. So that the person, that your staff, all of them are under 800,000, does not mean you still have to find new reports to the relevant tax authority. But for any income above 800,000 naira, that's graduated rates for each of the bands of the income. Okay. So let me summarize some of the obligations, the tax compliance obligations of charitable organizations such as the church. First of all, you are meant to formalize your operations by registering with CAC and then register with FINRS and obtain your tax identification number. You are meant to annually file your tax returns. Before you file your tax returns, it's expected you've kept your commercial transactions records. I think even currently, you are even meant to file returns for the church as a body, even though you are not meant to pay tithe. But your tithes and offerings, the government wants to see an account of a report of that. So the church is expected to withholding tax before making payments, charge VAT, and that. So finally, in the words of OEA 2025, religious organizations must embrace the faith accountant model. The faith accountant model here is your commercial arm, the enterprise of the church, supposed to be handled same way private corporations are handled. Keep your records, prepare your accounts, and file your tax returns as at when due. Finally, on the other hand, the state must recognize that religious giving is a vital component of the social safety net, deserving of physical recognition and support. Ultimately, the goal of both faith and fiscus should be the same: the welfare of the people and the prosperity of the nation. By resolving the dilemma between privacy in giving and transparency, powered by proper records, accountability, and statutory reporting, the church can create a harmonious environment where the covenants and the tax code work in tandem for the overall well-being and prosperity of the people. As earlier hinted, or by way of summary, development of tax sensitivity or consciousness, as well as accountability for every payment and receipt, is the way to go. By that I mean, every payment you receive, every payment you receive, every money you send out, always think of the tax implications, both as a church and as an individual, before you embark on that. Thank you. If time permits, I'll welcome your questions.
Thank you. Shall we appreciate our dear brother? Let's appreciate him. Thank you very much. We thank you. Our brother started by telling us that before the reform came up, there must have been some challenges. So the challenges were the reason for bringing up the tax reform, which was signed in 2025. And of course, he told us that taxation or the tax reform rests on tripod, and went ahead to let us know that the primary objective of the reform are: one, for harmonization, efficiency, to broaden the tax base and to make the economy more competitive. Then he went ahead to look at the 4 broad parts to which the tax reform had been, the reform acts have been domiciled. 1, the Nigerian Tax Act, the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, the Nigerian Revenue Service, of course, which is now replacing even the FIRS as the nomenclature, and then the Joint Revenue Board. And at that juncture, we asked that, how does this really affect the church? And that is the point where he now went ahead to let us know that the implication of the Reform Act are as follows. 1, as long as our resources are from offering and collection, normal collection to the church, tithes here and there, no tax is expected. But then, normal businesses, just like other people outside there do, will equally attract taxation. Probably we have water factory, we have school, you have bakery, all these. As long as it is revenue generating venture, then you must bring in the evidence of your tax payment compliance. And then he went ahead also to tell us that we should be careful to separate the church money from the business money. And in addition to that, he also told us that it is true we may not be paying taxes on offering and collection, but as long as we'll employ individuals who are working for the church, including even ministers, there is the need also for the payment of personal tax, personal income tax. And especially if you are earning above 800,000 annually, you must be ready to pay that. And also, those who are non-clergy are equally to pay their tax as required. He equally touched on the issue of the church now requiring whoever is coming to do any business with us, anybody coming to handle church projects, we must demand from the person the tax clearance certificate, which is TCC. That will also save you some problem. Yeah, because failure to do that when you are filing in, even your returns at the end of the year, there is a sanction for the church in that regard. And of course, which some of us are already doing, there is the need for the church, for the diocese to get registered and have your tax identification number. And this will save you a lot of problem. In fact, so many new churches trying to register now or open accounts in banks, they are requesting from them that they should bring the tin of the diocese or the tin of your church. That also is very, very important, and that we shouldn't forget the fact that there is a need for us to file in annual return, even though you are not to pay any tax to the government as it were. Now, for Reverend Professor Turaki, you could have forgotten some of the things he said before, because we are going to the interactive session for the next 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes. Because when he started, apart from what he had originally, he told us that the setup of any human society is within the ethnography, the geography, the religion, and the culture, which is subdivided to some probably superior, middle, and inferior. And in all of these, he equally identified the colonial interference, the colonial policies and administrative practices as what brought about the conflicts that we are experiencing now as exhibited in the 2 major religions we are having in Nigeria, Islam and Christianity. And of course, carefully, I may not speak too loudly about this one. He did mention it. Of course, the problem of insecurity. It's not just a matter of northern-southern dichotomy issue, but then a domicile is real finding in a particular ethnic subgroup, which, of course, is very obvious to every individual. And now, when it comes to the prophetic voice, how does the prophetic voice of the church matter in this area? Now, we try to say, for a prophet, you must first of all align with the theodicy of God. Agree what is God saying on this particular issue. And he tried to look at that by looking at the holiness of God, the truth that God is originator of truth. He looked at also what it means to be fair, justice and equity. He looked at all these and he said, now when we are now going to look at what the prophetic voice does, how is the society behaving? The prophetic voice, looking at God's holiness, look at the society, and then you challenge the society, you look at the weaknesses of the society, side by side with God's holiness, and then you try to give the message to the society. And when the society refuses to go or to align with God's own attributes, and that is where the issue of judgment comes up. And of course, he concluded, as it were, by looking at how this can be more practically addressed. He said, God has made man a co-creator. We are to partner with God in the work of co-creation. And of course, doing that, meaning we want to align with God's theodicy, God's righteousness, God's holiness. How do we look at creation ethics? How do we look at human ethics? And how does the national ethics also come into play? And of course, it equally ended, and I want to be silent about the reaction of the other group who are actually members of the other group who are reacting or behaving in such a way that each of these four major submissions he made, they will not easily submit to them. And as a result of that, the conflicts continue, the aberration continued, and all the problems in our society continue. But then that will not stop us as a church from heeding the prophetic voice or becoming the prophetic voice to be able to address the inequalities that is happening in the society. And I think I want to ask now if there are, thank you. I want to ask now if there are questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that we can stay within what our times. Yes, sir. How many do we take, sir? 3 from. Yes, sir. For 3 to Professor Turaki, and then 3 to Uche. Thank you. Now, 1.
Test equipment for rent, all at affordable prices. Tune in to ACNNTV via any free-to-air decoder with the following installation parameters: Intelsat 20 satellite with tuning frequency 12562 MHz, symbol rate 30 Mbps, orbital position